Can you tell me a little bit about your story in the context of how it brought you to the two mind method?
Years ago, actually, I'll just say most of my life, I've struggled with um, negative self-belief and debilitating stories and all that kind of stuff. Lots of big nervous system activations. And when I had some really big events happen in my life that were incredibly overwhelming, I went out and sought out therapy like everybody else. And then I got there and I would work with one person and then another and sometimes multiple at the same time. And then I'm enrolling in classes and all sorts of healing modalities, and nothing seemed to be gaining traction. And so I started doing my own research and I combined many things that I learned, and almost every aspect of the two mind method is based upon research of someone that I admire and respect and is way smarter and more educated than I am. I stand upon the shoulders of giants. And but when things really started making sense, the thing about it that really started ringing for me was when here's a set of concepts around childhood attachment, and okay, research that a ton, and it really starts making sense. And in my world, when it starts being able to predict future behavior, that is something really special. That's not just like, hey, we're going to help you with this discomfort you're feeling. We're actually going to predict a future outcome of a relational interaction. And when there were models who were starting to predict things accurately, I knew that we were like really onto something. And then I would find one that would predict something, and I'd find a different that would predict something else. I say, well, is there a joining point here? And I'd hunt and hunt and hunt, and eventually I'd find someone that would drop some interesting bit of information. And I was like, oh my goodness, that could link these two things together. And when that happened 3 or 4 times, I knew that there was a model that was beginning to form. And so now I try to teach that to other people. To me, the two mind method is the form of help and therapy that I needed when I was at my worst places, and I couldn't find it anywhere else. I came out from the point that I was at the tail end of 2 relationships that threw me to the moon in euphoria, in happiness, which I now recognize that euphoria, that kind of happiness, is a trauma response. So I went way super high with euphoria as part of the trauma, my unresolved trauma. Then I went crashing down and my life was destroyed. And I said, help me, anybody. My level of emotional activation was 11 out of 10. Most therapists could not handle what I was bringing to the table. Yeah, so therapy wasn't helping, coaching wasn't helping. There's very few things that were actually bringing any solace to my misery and suffering. And then when I discovered attachment theory, it was at least telling me why it's happening. And I'm like, okay, well, I can work with that. And then I found this book written in 1998, I think. Back in those days, attachment theory was still kind of new. And the person said, if you have these 2 types of attachment styles and they get together like this, then at month 3, you're going to have this kind of problem. And at maybe month 6, you're going to have this kind of problem. And 8, you're going to have that kind of problem. And then I looked at the relationship that I was just recovering from in 2018, and it followed that to the letter. At 3 months, we had that problem. At 6 months, we had that. And I said, wait a second, a book that was written 20 years ago is predicting the outcome of this relationship that I just went through. What the hell is happening? And so that's when I said, there's more to this, and I started digging deeper. And then as I go through attachment theory, that brings us to the childhood development stuff, and then processing of trauma. And then I realized that my entire childhood was one continuous trauma response 24/7 for I don't even know how long. And then I became acutely aware of where that put me and how much effort and pain and suffering that I had to go through in my world and my life. And I said, you guys, mom and dad, I mean, I do have compassion for them. They're also broken people and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just like, they just didn't know. And I'm like, more people need to know this. How can I teach? And I've loved teaching my whole life. And so I said, oh. But again, there was missing pieces. And then I said, oh, I want to find answers to those missing pieces first. So that started a 2 or 3 year journey, and that came to here, and now I'm here. My children are the kids of the orphanage. My children are the kids of every person I help. These are my children on earth. When somebody once asked me, when I was very early into this, and they said, "What is your goal?" And I said, "My goal is to make sure another one of me is never made. I don't want any child to ever go through what I went through." And I think we now know how to do it. I think we now know how to teach people and give them the concepts and the tools necessary to prevent that from happening. But you have to be disciplined, you have to be focused, and you have to be humble.